Hey guys, so I am very excited by today's video because it is going to be about duendes. Now, like any other Hispanic kid, I also grew up listening to duende stories and I've always loved listening to them. I've always been very fascinated by them, so I am very excited by this. So duendes are basically these goblin slash gnome slash leprechaun looking creatures who are about or said to be about 2 feet tall or around there. And there are so many different versions of them out there all over the world, from Latin America to the Philippines to Spain, Ireland, Germany, Hawaii, everywhere. So people say many different things about them. They can either be good or bad. They're all very mischievous and they love playing pranks on you. And in some parts of the world, it is said that they either kidnap children or they protect them or they simply just like to scare children that are misbehaving. So I actually found some stories of duendes online that I am going to be reading for today's video. So please get cozy and let's get started. For those who don't know what duendes are, they're essentially elves or a leprechaun. These things are either good or bad, but either way mischievous. The bad ones are said to lure kids away and the good ones will play pranks on you. Anyways, this happened when I was 13 or 14. This was probably one of the last times I went consistently. My aunt lived very close to a mountain near Oaxaca. Her husband, my uncle, was a pretty wealthy guy. He sold and bred livestock. He had a lot of horses, cattle, goats, and dogs. Their house was a pretty big place with lots of land for the animals. Of course, their house was very isolated. The closest town was miles away. We went there one year to stay with her and everything was normal for the first few days. When the weird stuff started happening was one early morning. I wear wristwatches and I take it off to go to bed and put it back on after I brush my teeth and whatnot. I remember waking up, grabbing my watch and putting it on top of the shelf outside of the bathroom, brushing my teeth and coming back to find it gone. I thought for a second and looked around the shelf and under but didn't find it. I went back to the room I was staying in and I looked around and I couldn't find it. I thought maybe one of my siblings were playing with me, but I looked around and all 3 of my siblings were sleeping on the floor. That's when I started getting not scared but worried. I go to look around the shelf one more time and I still couldn't find it. I remember saying out loud, "Whoever took my watch, give it back because I'm getting mad." I walk away to put my shoes on and from the living room I can hear a slight noise. It was my alarm on my watch going off. I peeked my head into the hallway and I could see the blue light from my watch. That's when I got scared. I walked up to it and put it on and I got an uneasy feeling. I go to watch TV and I see my aunt walking into the kitchen and I say good morning and ask her if she grabbed my watch. She says no, but to not leave valuables in the open. I ask why and she says the duendes will take them and hide them. I gave an uncomfortable laugh and say, right. She obviously saw that I thought she was crazy. She told me that she was serious and that the duende probably grabbed my watch. In my mind, I'm saying, this lady is nuts. Later on that day, I asked my mom if duendes were real. She gave me a concerned look and asked why. I told her my aunt said that there were duendes in her house. She steered away from the question and just said, if you feel scared, just pray. I didn't think about it much after that. I remember we watched a movie in the living room and I fell asleep on the couch. I remember waking up to a thud coming from the kitchen and footsteps running from the kitchen. The footsteps were light but still audible. It sounded like when a cat runs. I see the light turn on from the hallway and I see my aunt running towards the kitchen. I hear her say, "Mendigos duendes," which means damn elves. I slowly get up and peek in the kitchen and it's a huge mess. A lot of stuff knocked over, most of it food. I asked if an animal got in, maybe a raccoon. She's aggravated of the mess and just says duendes. I roll my eyes and I look at my watch. It was almost 4 a.m. I decided to help her clean up. We finished cleaning up in about 20 minutes and when I help her with the dustpan, it is one of those sucky ones where you have to crouch over to hold it. When I crouch over, I look at the huge pile of food and I can see either sugar or flour and made out little tiny footprints. Not baby footprints, but smaller, like if a lizard had human feet. I look at my aunt and she knows I saw them. She says, "I told you." I'm still not completely convinced, so I go to bed and wake up. Nothing happened for a few days. The last experience I had with these things was when I was sleeping and for some reason I woke up. No reason at all. I remember feeling uneasy and hearing those footsteps again as something small was running in front of the bed. I sit up fast and see a small shadow running weird, like if it was waddling but still moving kind of fast. All this happened in a matter of seconds and I turned on the lights and nothing is there. I couldn't make the shadow out, but it was small, maybe a foot tall. That's when I started believing in that shit. I was so uneasy after that and I was glad I was out of there. I mean, I don't see why in the world her aunt would do that to her own kitchen and make a mess just so that she can scare her, you know? So, I don't know. I hear they're pretty active in Mexico. Alright guys, so I'm gonna read the next story. My father had an experience with something similar when he was around 4 years old back in the 60s. He was on death's door with an infection and was on bed rest in my grandmother's house in I can't say that. Sorry. In the northern part of Scotland. The doctors and nurses had told my grandmother it was more of a waiting game at this point. My father was in a critical condition. Now, my father has nothing to gain from telling me this and only ever mentioned when I asked him if he had ever had an experience, which he could not explain. My father is not knowledgeable of the paranormal whatsoever and would have no previous knowledge of duendes/elves/gnomes, etc. He said he was laying in his bed one night, very unwell. His room was dark, and as he lay there, his door slowly opened. He said one by one, in a line, a group of small, around 1 foot tall, little people walked in uniformly, walked to the end of his bed and jumped on the chair which sat there, where my grandmother and the doctors would have sat when caring for him. He said although confused, he was not scared as they just stood on the chair staring at him. After a second, he said he just blacked out. He woke up the next morning and had completely recovered and was in perfect health. When the doctors came out to see him, he said that the recovery was miraculous. Now, of course, the little people could be due to vivid hallucinations induced by the illness. However, the recovery is unexplainable. I have asked my grandmother before if this story is true, and she assured me that he had been on death's door with an illness and miraculously recovered overnight. Okay, so this one is new to me because I have never heard of a duende curing people. Have you? I wonder if it just depends on what part of the world you're in, because apparently duendes in Scotland are pretty nice. Alright guys, so on to the next story. This happened to me about 4 years ago. I was coming home from work one day. It was around 6 to 6:30, and here in Canada in the winter months, it is nighttime at this point. I was driving home, street lights are on, and nothing unusual, except as I was leaving work, I saw what looked like to me like a little boy in my rearview mirror about, I'd say, 50 feet behind me in the middle of the parking lot. Kind of strange, but I didn't pay any attention to it. And as I was driving home, I saw the same kid, or at this point, I thought it was a different kid, about 3 blocks from where my work is, and he was just staring at me as I drove by. I had a slight chill and I tried not to think about it much, but it was creepy. I only live about 7 minutes from my work, so it doesn't take long for me to get home. I didn't see him again until I was about 2 blocks away. This time he was under a street lamp, so I got a better look at him, and to my surprise, it was not a kid at all. In Mexico, we call these creatures duendes. They are usually small, fairy-like creatures with the appearance of an old man. Their heights do vary, but I myself have never seen one to be the size of a child. He looked exactly like an old man as I drove past him, about to turn the corner. I was freaking out at this point and I just wanted to get home. This thing was following me. As I approached to turn the last corner of my house, there he was again. I slammed on my brakes because there it was right in front of my car, just crossing the street. It looked up at me as he was walking past my car and gave me the most evil grin I have ever seen. I was about to run him over with my car, but I was just frozen in place. As soon as he was on the other side of the street, I gunned it home. but I took one final glance in my rearview mirror to see if he was still behind me. It was gone. It wasn't on the other side of the street or anything. I didn't care, but I was so frightened. I got home, got out of my car, and looked around to see if it was nearby. I was fortunate enough not to see it again, but I made sure to look down the street both ways before going into my house. I got in, locked the door, closed the curtain, and tried to forget what I saw. Even my wife knew something had spooked me. I didn't tell her until the following day. I didn't want to scare her at the time. I hope I don't see it again. This is what I mean about they love playing pranks on you, because this one, they clearly just wanted to scare this poor guy. I would be freaking terrified if this little creature was following me home at nighttime. No. Alright guys, let's move on. Growing up with a Mexican grandmother in Southern California, I grew up listening to tales of El Diablo, Fantasmas, most notably La Llorona, the spirit of a woman who lost her children and wanders at night looking for kids to claim as her own. My family would use this story as a way to make sure the kids wouldn't be home out late at night. I also grew up hearing about duendes or gnomes, though not just from my abuela. My grandmother would tell me stories of duendes playing tricks on people in the forest. She told a story that she once saw some as a child. Growing up, I would go to large family gatherings, the kinds where everyone is a tío, tía, or primo, even if they really weren't. So at one of these family gatherings, I must have been around 15 years old at the time. There was a large group of younger primas. The group consisted of about 6 or so primas, ranging from 5 to 12 years old. You would always see them playing together, always smiling, always happy. So at this particular family gathering, I noticed the oldest one, I'll call her Jackie, off in the corner watching the primas play. She had a despondent look on her face, which I had never seen before. I asked her what was the matter, and she would shake her head. I left her alone for a while, and later on approached me and said that she could tell me, but that I wouldn't believe her. I told her I'd tried my best to believe her, and she told me that she would tell me, but that she didn't care if I did or not. She appeared almost scared to tell me. So her story goes that she saw duendes creep into her room that she shared with her younger sister. She said she saw 4 duendes come into her room from the open window, climb up her dresser, take something, and leave. I'm sure she gave other details, but it's been too long to remember. I'd love to ask her now as an adult, but it's been years since I've seen or heard from her. At 15, my first impression was that she was making it all up, but I found it strange that she would lie. I found the way that she told me strange. The girl seemed genuinely scared of the experience she had. The next story I heard was when I was around 18 years old from my best friend's mom, who grew up in Bolivia, close to the jungle. She said that as a little girl, she was lured into the jungle by being put into a trance-like state by duendes. She remembers feeling like the duendes wanted to play with her, so she followed them towards the jungle, and was only snapped out of the trance by her younger sister, who had grabbed her before entering the thick of the jungle. This was an honest woman, well into her 50s, who said things as they were. My last story comes from a good friend of mine who I believe to be honest with a good head on her shoulders. It's my girlfriend, actually. The story she told me comes from the Philippines. So about 10 years ago, she visited the Philippines, and while staying at her aunt's house, she noticed her younger cousin behaving oddly. She mentioned it to her aunt, who told her that her cousin plays with duendes. They also call them duendes in the Philippines. When asking her cousin, who was around 7 years old, about the duendes, she told her that she would play with them out near the bushes. She told her the duendes would get mad if she refused to play with them. They would at times hold her back from returning to her house when her mother called, but they wanted to continue playing with her. They even hurt her at times. The aunt confirmed that she had seen them and had been trying to figure out a way to shield her daughter from the duendes. My girlfriend's aunt told her recently that if she asked her daughter about it now, that she wouldn't recall any of it. Perhaps due to the trauma of those experiences, who knows? Accounts of duendes, gnomes, or little people come from all over the world. I've just mentioned some from 4 different countries. 2 different continents. I don't believe them to be a work of fiction, but a creature that we have yet to officially place. That poor little girl. I wonder how they would hurt her. Okay, let's see about the one that they tried to lure her into the jungle. I have heard that they do live in jungles, at least in some parts of the world, I guess. They were probably trying to kidnap her or something. Okay guys, so let's move on to the next story. My dad's side of the family have duendes following them as well. My grandpa is from Tula de Allende, Hidalgo, Mexico. Last time I went to visit, he told me about a river that he never goes to anymore because he said he saw a bunch of duendes having a gathering there. He didn't go too into what was going on, but it freaked him out a lot and he now stays away from that river. He mentions a lot about his loose change going missing, and he also told me about how he's sometimes eating caldo or frijoles and he'll have a tortilla on his right side and he'll look down and it's not there no more and it reappears when he looks away. I do believe him. I don't think he would have a reason to lie. Also, I have gone to a tarot reader a couple of times and she always brings up how I have duendes / spirits following me and to always carry dry roses. I believe she said dry roses, I can't recall, in my purse to please them, and have green stuff and natural flowers around the house for them. She also mentioned to keep salt in my bag to keep them away from taking my change. I have never mentioned to her about my grandpa seeing them and having them in his house. Okay, so I have heard about that they love taking people's change for whatever reason. Now the dry roses and having green stuff around the house, I've never heard about that. I don't know, but let me know if you have heard about that. Alright guys, so this is my last story for this video. My wife and I are both college educated professionals. Other than this one time that I'm about to describe, we've never experienced anything that would qualify as paranormal. We've never seen ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, etc. The reason why I'm posting this is because I am genuinely looking for any information on what we saw. At the time, about 12 years ago, we lived in northeastern Arizona in southern Apache County, close to the Navajo Nation. We had no kids at that time and would typically go out to dinner after work on Friday nights. We would drive about an hour to a neighboring town as our very small town had a few good restaurants. As we were driving back, my wife was behind the wheel. It was around 9 or 10 p.m. and we were both watching out for animals. It wasn't uncommon to see deer, antelope, and jackrabbits, which could damage our truck if hit. We'd also often see rats, mice, and prairie dogs too. So as we're going along, all of a sudden, this small, about 18 inches tall, creature goes running out in front of us. It ran from one side of the road to the other and disappeared in the cedar trees that are typical along the main highway we were traveling. The most messed up part was that the thing was wearing clothes. It was dressed in a robe and had a pointy hat. We can't really remember the colors of the clothes, but we both agree that the hat was red. It did not look cute or friendly, more like the stuff of nightmares. Its skin was dark brown or dark gray. Its face looked monstrous and was grimacing. I had the impression that it was very distressed and seemed to be running away from something or someone. It seemed oblivious to us and our truck. I looked over at my wife, who neither hit the brakes nor swerved whatsoever, and she's just looking straight ahead at the road. I seriously thought I had just had a hallucination. Not because I've had one before, but I can't believe what I just saw. So I said, "Did you see that?" To which she quietly replied, "Yeah." In order to confirm my own sanity, I needed to hear her say what she saw first. I then said, "What did you see?" She then said, "Like a little person with the wizard hat on." Then I said, "Yeah, what the fuck?" I honestly wouldn't believe my own eyes and memory if she hadn't seen it too. She also said that if I hadn't seen it too, she would have completely shut it out of her mind and would have long forgotten it by now. We've talked about it several times since then and are still dumbfounded on what it was. I've done some research and it's hard to glean any information because people all over the world have claimed to see small humanoid creatures for hundreds, if not thousands of years. The variations are all over the place. This thing wasn't like the friendly looking garden gnomes that people have in their yards. I hope to never see one again, and sure as shit wouldn't go looking for one. My wife once described it as a little demon. I would have tried to run over it. Alright guys, so there you have it. These are the stories for today. Let me know which story you thought was the creepiest one, and let me know your thoughts on duendes and your stories, because I know you guys have some. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys on the next video.